Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, March 27th, 2026. Life without the federal income tax. President Trump has repeatedly advocated for eliminating the federal income tax. Now, while many Washington spokespersons ignore the benefits of such a move, focusing instead on why it can't be done, this report highlights the immediate advantages for our businesses, citizens, and economy once the income tax is abolished. Once the public demands an end to the income tax and the intrusive filing process, then we can implement superior alternative funding methods. Repealing the federal income tax would be the most significant shift in the American social contract since the ratification of the 16th Amendment in 1913. The purpose of this Chairman's Report is to draw attention to the benefits to our businesses, our citizens, and to our economy that will immediately flow once the income tax is eliminated. When the people demand elimination of the income tax and the filing of tax returns, then we can work out the best alternative ways to fund the government. The Tax Foundation calculated the cost of the income tax. Here's what they found. In 2024, Americans filed 266.6 million tax returns. Of these, over 65%, or 174.4 million, were individual and corporate income tax returns, while another 33.6 million were employment tax returns. According to the latest estimates from the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, Americans will spend almost 7.1 billion hours complying with IRS tax filing and reporting requirements in 2025. This is equal to 3.4 million full-time workers, almost the population of Los Angeles and nearly 38 times the workforce the IRS employed in fiscal year 2024, all those people doing nothing but tax return paperwork for a full year. Now, if we assume a reasonable hourly wage, the 7.1 billion hours that Americans spend complying with the tax code cost the economy roughly $388 billion in lost productivity. In addition, the IRS estimates that Americans spend roughly $148 billion annually in out-of-pocket costs to comply with the tax code. This brings total compliance cost to $536 billion, or nearly 1.8% of GDP. For the business sector, repealing the corporate income tax would eliminate a staggering administrative burden estimated to cost 6.5 billion hours annually. This extra time and money then could be directed to producing better products and creating more expansion. When the income tax is gone, individuals will keep 100% of their paycheck and no longer file tax returns. Today, government withholding and payroll taxes can consume 20 to 30% of a worker's paycheck before the worker even sees it. When the income tax is gone, employees will receive every dime they earn without the government skimming a big cut off the top. Now, current tax law creates a systemic bias towards debt financing because interest payments are deductible while dividends are not. Repealing the income tax would equalize the treatment of equity and debt, encouraging firms to retain earnings for internal investment. Projections suggest that removing the tax on capital income could expand the long-run capital stock by 3.4 to 4.8%, boosting labor productivity and raising wages. Now, the D.C. elites have long believed that ordinary citizens are just not smart enough to look after themselves. They believe that their superior intellect gives them the right to decide what's best for the rest of us, and that we all must be helped along in order to act in our own best interests. The federal government currently uses the income tax code to subsidize specific behaviors that they believe are good, and have long used the tax code to encourage good behavior with tax breaks and deductions while discouraging bad behavior with tax penalties. Now, many people forget these things about an income tax deduction. To benefit from deductions, one must itemize, something that only 10% of present income tax filers do. Now, the value of a deduction varies by taxpayer. The higher the income, the more the benefit of a deduction. To see the value of a deduction to you, calculate the effective tax rate percentage. That's the percentage determined by dividing the amount of income taxes paid by your total income. For example, if your effective tax rate percentage is 20% and you have a $10,000 deduction, your tax savings is $2,000. This means that if you did not take the deduction, you would have paid $2,000 in taxes and had $8,000 left. It cost you $8,000 to take the deduction. In fact, deductions can only benefit a small number of taxpayers, and they increase the price of everything. An example is the mortgage interest deduction. It's only available to the 10% of taxpayers who itemize their deductions. According to the Tax Policy Center, about 75% of the total tax savings from this deduction goes to households earning over $200,000 a year. Studies suggest that removing the home mortgage interest deduction would have little effect on home ownership rates. Studies by the National Association of Realtors say that it could lead to an 8 to a 28% drop in housing prices. This means that without the home mortgage deduction, the price of homes will reduce between 8 and 28%. Now, 90% of us are paying between 8 and 28% more than we would be paying if the home mortgage deduction was eliminated. When the income tax is repealed, lobbyists can no longer funnel millions of dollars to members of Congress in return for their support of tax benefits for the lobbyist clients. There will be no need for complicated IRAs or 401ks. 100% of the money earned from work, savings, or investment will belong to you. Now, if employers want to contribute to a retirement account for employees, they can do so and limit the withdrawal until a certain age. However, the account will not require actuaries and tax accountants, but simply be a contract between the company and the employees. Without the income tax, U.S. exporters will be more competitive because their prices will no longer contain the 10 to 20% cost of the income tax system. This means that U.S. businesses will be able to lower their prices by 10 to 20% and still make the same profit. Without the income tax, investors from around the world would compete to invest in the United States. This will allow our companies to invest in equipment and technology that would enable them to become more productive. Increases in productivity lead to increases in wages. In conclusion, the few people who favor keeping the income tax are almost always people who either earn large amounts working on the income tax or those who have structured their lives to not have taxable income. While there can be legitimate debates on the best alternative to the income tax, it's time to make members of Congress explain why they don't want the rest of us to enjoy the benefits of not having an income tax. The FAIRtax is the answer. The FAIRtax is a national retail sales tax on the purchase of new retail goods and retail services. It provides a family credit so that all purchases up to the poverty level for each family are not taxed. There's no withholding from your paycheck, and you never have to file an income tax return again telling the government how much you earned and how much you spent. Plus, you will never be harassed by the IRS ever again because the FAIRtax abolishes the IRS. Now, many of you have labored tirelessly for freedom from the federal income tax and the IRS. You deserve a great deal of credit for your efforts to educate the American people on the need to fund the American government in a way that's good for America and returns freedom to the American people. It's imperative, though, that we don't replace the current income tax and the IRS with an alternative system that can still be manipulated by the ruling elite. We must let Congress and the President know that the best way to replace the income tax and the IRS is with the FAIRtax. Now, make no mistake about it. The FAIRtax is a grave threat to the ruling elites. It will strip them of their power and their ability to control us through the tax system. Their opposition to the FAIRtax will be fierce and unrelenting. And don't think for an instant they won't use half-truths, deception, and downright lies in their desperate attempts to hang on to their power. However, with the support of this president, we can finally eliminate the income tax and the IRS. Of course, the best course of action is not only to repeal the income tax and abolish the IRS, but to repeal the 16th Amendment as well, so no future administration can ever shackle the American people with an income tax again. We must come together and ensure that real tax reform, the FAIRtax, is not subverted by the elites in D.C. This will take the diligent effort from all of us. We need your financial assistance and we need your grassroots assistance. Now, if you have contacts that will allow us to get more information about the fair tax to President Trump, please let us know. Please email us at info@fairtax.org, and we'll give you some options on how you can best help us. At a minimum, please call your congressional representatives and ask if he or she supports the fair tax. If so, thank him or her for their support and suggest they become a co-sponsor of H.R. 25 if they're not one already. If not, ask why not. Now, if your representative claims to be unfamiliar with the fair tax, offer to have someone come to their office and explain it to them. The solution? Pass the fair tax. Now, why would D.C. pass the fair tax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to FAIRtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the fair tax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.